Hello, welcome to the next lesson in Spiral 1. We're looking at solving two-step equations today. So, yesterday we worked on the one-step equations. Now we're looking at two-step equations. If you look back, it took one step to get to a final answer. And today, as the name indicates, we're going to look at questions or equations that require us to do two steps in order to get there. All right. So two-step equations typically will involve two terms on one side of the equation, as it shows in our teeter-totter example. So we know the teeter-totter must remain balanced. So it's the same thing here. So I'm going to put off to the side here. So let's go with steps / rules. So step 1 is eliminate, get rid of any adding or subtracting first. So that's the first thing we want to do, okay? We want to eliminate any adding or subtracting. So same as what we did yesterday, what you need to think of is instead of getting x by itself, what we're doing today is we're going to get rid of 4x, or get 4x by itself first, all right? So that means that what I've circled, I want to get it by itself first. So in order to get that red circle by itself, we need to get rid of that plus 2. So similar to what we did yesterday, the opposite of adding, or the inverse, is subtracting. So we put subtract 2 on both sides. So that's step 1. So what happens is that 2 minus 2, well, that cancels it out. And that 10 take away 2, that's going to leave me with 8. All right? So now we have 4x on one side of the teeter-totter and 8 on the other. We still have to get x by itself, but now we're down to a one-step equation. What's happening to this 4x? We have multiplication. Talked about this yesterday. The inverse of multiplication is division. So we need to divide both sides by 4. So therefore, we end up with x equals 2. All right? So it's that process of keeping the teeter-totter balanced, all right, and using inverse operation. So when I go back to my steps and rules, eliminate any adding and subtracting first. Your next step is to eliminate any multiplication, division second. All right, you should always be multiplying and dividing in your last step. If you're doing it first, you've probably made an error, okay? Now, let's try to do this without the teeter-totter. Okay, so what does this look like without the teeter-totter? So what I would expect from you off the start, I want you to circle the x term with the number in front, because that tells you what you need to get by itself. So you need to get the green bubble by itself. How do we do that? We get rid of the 2, the opposite of plus 2. Oops, I shouldn't put that. It looks like division, and I don't want that. Don't want confusion there. I'm going to subtract 2. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. And again, I can't stress enough, I need to see the red, I need to see those subtract 2's if you want full marks. 4x equals 8. What's happening to the 4 and the x is multiplying, opposite of multiplying. I want to see the division bar. So again, I'm stressing, I need to see the red if you want full marks, because you're showing all your steps in the process. So that's what it looks like without the teeter-totter analogy, but it keeps them, the teeter-totter allows us to remind ourselves we need to make sure whatever we do to one side of an equation, we got to do the exact same to the other. So in the empty space provided, we're going to go through a couple of equations like we did yesterday and work our way through. So the first one we're looking at, number 1, let's do x divided by 5 minus 2 equals 6. So for the first step, I want you to circle the term with the x in it. So we're going to circle that. I want to get that green bubble by itself first. That is your goal. That means that that 2 has got to disappear. It's a negative 2. Opposite of a negative 2 is a positive 2. Whatever we do to one side, I have to do to the other. So we put a plus 2 on both sides. Negative 2 plus 2 disappears, cancels each other out. It becomes 0. So I have x over 5 left, and 6 plus 2 gives me 8. Now, I have x over 5. This bar means division, so the opposite of division is multiplication, but whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. Again, I'm going to stress this. I need to see the red if you want full marks. I do not worry about the answer. I'm worried about your process. That's what's important. So there we go. For this equation to be true, x would have to equal 40. Next example. If we have negative 7 plus 3x equals 9. So again, with your pencil, you want to circle the term with the x in it. So the green bubble is what we got to get by itself to start. So that means we have to get rid of the negative 7. So what is the opposite of negative 7? Well, the opposite is plus 7. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. I have to see that notation for full marks. Negative 7 plus 7 is 0. 3x equals 9 plus 7 is 16. Now the next step, what is happening between our 3 and the x? We have multiplication. The opposite of multiplication is division. Whatever I do to one side, we do to the other. 3 divided by 3 is 1. X equals 16 over 3 is just a fraction. You can leave it as a fraction. You can go ahead and do the division if that makes you feel better, but you can leave that as your final answer. There's no requirement to switch it to an improper fraction. That is your answer. All right, number 3, another two-step equation. Let's go do one that looks like this. 3x plus 5x equals 16. All right, so this one looks a little bit different. It's still a two-step equation. But what happens, what do we have on the one side? So before I said the first thing is circle your x terms. Well, I'm going to have two circles in this case. What that means is that we've got two terms that are like terms. So the question is, how many x's do we really have here? Well, we have 3 plus 5 is 8x equals 16. So this is a two-step equation because it's still going to require us 2 steps to get to a final answer. So there's your first step. What is happening between the 8 and the x? It's multiplication. Opposite of multiplication is division. When you do that, 8 divided by 8 is 1. 16 divided by 8 is 2. And there's your final answer. All right, so a little bit different twist. We can collect like terms as well. All right. Fourth and final example, if I have, now this will be a tricky one here, so let's do negative 3 minus x over 2 equals 4. All right, so first step, as I said always, circle the x term. We want to get this by itself. So that means the negative 3 has to go. So that means I'll have to add 3. If I add 3 to one side, I have to add 3 to the other side. Negative 3 plus 3 will cancel each other out, becomes 0. Negative x over 2 equals 7, and here's the tricky part. What is happening to x here? Well, it's divided, and we have a negative sign. So that means that we are going to multiply both sides. We want to get rid of the negative and the 2. So we're going to multiply this side by negative 2. Whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. The reason we do that, going back to the first lesson, what happens if we have a negative and a negative? 2 negatives make a positive. So it means my negative signs are going to disappear, cancel out. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So I'm just left with an x. 7 times negative 2 is negative 14. All right. I'll do one more like that. If you don't have enough space, that's fine. You can just follow along with the lesson here. So what happens for example number 5 if I have 5 minus 3x equals, let's go with 9. So same process. You circle the term with the x. All right. That means we need to get rid of the 5. This is a positive 5. So to get rid of it, I'm going to have to subtract 5. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I'm going to subtract 5. Again, I need to see what's in red for full marks. 5 take away 5 is 0. negative 3x equals 9 take away 5 is 4. Now, what is happening to this x? It's being multiplied by negative 3. The opposite of multiplying by negative 3 is dividing by negative 3. Whatever I do to one side has to happen to the other. The negative 3 divided by negative 3, the negative over negative. Okay, that becomes a positive, so they disappear. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And we end up with x equals negative 4 over 3. All right, and as a reminder, okay, that negative sign, remember that negative 4 over 3 is equal to negative 4 over 3 equals 4 over negative 3. It doesn't matter where the negative sign appears inside my fraction. Okay, it could be in the bottom, could be the top, could be out front. You can write it all three ways. They're all correct, so keep that in mind. All right, so there's your two-step equations. Try the homework for this particular lesson. And if you have any questions, make sure you ask your teacher for help. Good luck.